Hello and welcome to my channel. I still really haven't got a proper name for it yet. So using my name, which is John, you can stay as that, but if you have any suggestions, please put them in the comment section below. That's probably asking and letting open a can of worms, but you never know. People on the internet might be kind. Yeah. Right, today I'm going to be doing a little bit of a review roundup. I started a couple of days ago with the Gaslight Anthem's most recent record and did a review of that, and then I realised actually it's going to take me forever to catch up with albums I've heard from this year. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a brief roundup of all the albums I've listened to and rated, not necessarily put online, but you know, into one video, and then I can sort of go on from there. So we are starting with Mastodon. If you've heard of Mastodon, sludge metal band / progressive metal band. Seriously good, big fan of Mastodon, have been for a long time. And they released a new record this year, Once More Round the Sun. And it was more of a, sonically meant to be more of a direct follow-on from their previous record, The Hunter. And let me just tell you, this album is just superb from start to finish. It's taut, it's focused, whereas the Hunter I found a little bit lacking in focus in places. I felt it couldn't quite decide what it wanted to be, whether it wanted to be a more sludgy sort of traditional Mastodon album like Leviathan and Blood Mountain were, or whether it wanted to be a bit more proggy like Crack the Sky was, whether it wanted to be a bit more accessible, radio friendly, commercial, and as it tried to be all those things in places, and I just felt it was a bit of a mess. It was still a good album, don't get me wrong, but I thought it was a bit of a mess, whereas in Once More Around the Sun kind of follows on from there, but it gains focus. And with this you get probably one of the best commercial metal albums you will ever hear in your life. It is just, simply put, it's killer song after killer song after killer song, and not all of them are radio friendly. I mean, you've got the Motherload and High Road, I believe, are the two tracks that they've released as promo singles, and both of those are choruses catchier than than Ebola. I can't say that, can I? It's true, they are. They're catchier than Ebola, because Ebola is really hard to catch. Scientists have told us. Yeah, and it's just truly special record. If you're going to download a track from it, I'd download High Road, or Motherload, or there is the rather special self-titled track Once More Around the Sun, which again is an absolute killer tune as well. But overall, superb albums. This would get a 9 out of 10 from me, which is quite high praise because I can be quite harsh. Second on the list, we have got the Great Western Valkyrie. This was a song. This was an album by Rival Sons. Now, Rival Sons are a very new band to me, I've got to be honest. They're a band I'd heard of for quite a long time, but it's only in the last couple of months that I actually have started listening to them. And I started with, I think, their previous record, Head Down, which I thought was quite solid in its one way. I found I had a couple of issues with it, with some of the guitar playing. I felt some of the solos were just abject and really quite disappointing. There was no sort of climax or crescendo to a lot of their guitar solos. They just seemed to start, wander around for a couple of bars and then stop. They didn't really go anywhere. And also as well, some of the production I found was a bit too effect laden and a bit too reliant on gimmicks, whereas it just didn't really deliver the sound properly. So I was hoping that the Great Western Valkyrie would sort those two things out, because other than that, great vocalist, great drummer, generally really good, well written songs, but they just had those things to tweak, and they were on the cusp of something really good, and thankfully they did. On this album they sorted the production out. The gimmicks are pretty much gone. They still appear in a couple of moments, but actually they're there as more of a, it adds to it rather than detracts from it on this record. And the guitar solos, thank you. He has finally realised that a guitar solo is not just picking a few notes and pressing down on a wah-wah pedal or using your whammy bar for a few seconds. You've really actually got to do something and go somewhere, and on this record he does. And whether it's been suddenly now he's been given the freedom to, or whether he's just actually realised that he can actually play the guitar, I do not know. But one thing I know is that the solos on this record are absolutely top draw. And the songs in general as well on this record, there isn't a dodgy song on the album. It's fantastic. I've been listening to it non-stop for the past few weeks. The addition of keyboards as well, I think, is particularly great, because I think, again, one of the things they relied on from Head Down, which I noted, was they've only got one guitarist, and yet always on Head Down you would always hear two guitar parts playing. And I thought, well, it'd be great if they had a guitarist with them live, but you checked it out, and they don't have a touring guitarist. So, you know, those songs would sound empty live, and then that would really frustrate me if I was going to see them live, having heard the record mean something different, and so on and so forth. But they've really done it. Adding the keyboardist means that their reliance on overdubbing with guitars has become less, and therefore, and they tour with a keyboardist now as well. So these songs can be filled out. Plus the songs from Head Down that sounded a bit empty, you can now, you see, fill the sound out a bit without having to rely on your solo single guitarist overdubbing all the time on tracks. So yeah, great record. Not perfect, but it's there's not a bad there's really not a bad track on the record. And the vocalist for me is one of the best rock vocalists going. So I'm going to give that one a nice 9 out of 10. It's going well so far for records, isn't it? Next we have Futurology by the Manic Street Preachers. Okay, now given what I've already discussed and talked about, you'll be thinking, that's a bit left field, isn't it? And it is. But for me, I've been a Manic Street Preachers fan since I started listening to music. They were the band that got me into music. So regardless of how my musical tastes change over the course of maybe getting older, this is a band that will always stay with me. And Futurology is their newest album. I believe it's their 12th or their 13th. They've released quite a lot now. And it is, I suppose, it is the other half to last year's Rewind the Film. And actually, you're better off listening to these two sort of in tandem with each other. And it's great. It's a fantastic record, Futurology. It is quintessentially Manic sounding, which is every single Manic's album ever released is quintessentially Manic, but they always do something different. Bring an influence in completely that you weren't expecting. And Futurology, they do that where you have like proper European synth pop influences, krautrock influences, and what you get is this really interesting synthy European dance floor sounding record, but with classic James Dean Bradfield-esque guitar wails going in, politicised lyrics, and generally speaking, it's the most invigorated I've heard them sound in 15 years. Maybe more than that. I mean, it's just the most relevant album they have done for a very long time, and it is just wonderful to hear a band who on their previous record seemed to be terrified at the thought of going into middle age, and on this album they just embrace middle age and they go, you know what, fuck you, fuck everyone who thinks we're crap, this is what we're going to do, and the result is just something wonderful. So really I suggest, highly recommend you listen to this album if you have even slightest interest in rock music, or in a band that always constantly tries to offer something different and interesting. Listen to this album. For me, it gets a rather splendid, perfect 10 out of 10. I don't think I'll hear a better album than this year. I don't think I'll hear a better album than this next year. Quite honestly, it's just for me, it's pretty much the best thing they've ever done, bar maybe Everything Must Go in the Holy Bible. Seriously, on that level. Brilliant. Alright, next we have Killer Be Killed. This is a supergroup, I believe, consisting of the lead singer of the Dillinger Escape Plan, Max Cavalera, I can never get his surname right, of Sepultura, Soulfly, Cavalera Conspiracy, Troy Sanders of Mastodon, and the drummer who formerly was the drummer of the Mars Volta, I believe. And this one kind of came out of nowhere. I didn't know this was coming out. I just kind of came across it one day going, oh, Killer Be Killed, who are they? Oh, sounds interesting. And yeah, it's alright. It's not great. It's not amazing. It's not necessarily, if I had known this album was coming out 6 months before it's released, I think I'd have got very excited, and I think I would have listened to it and been very, very disappointed in it. I probably ended up with a worse score than I'm going to give it. And it's got some good tunes on there. I just don't think it necessarily adds up to the sum of its parts. I mean, you've got Troy Sanders and Mastodon. Mastodon, I've mentioned them already in this video. Are just sensational. And Troy Sanders is great with his vocals, again, and his bass playing is excellent. And then you have the lead singer from the Dillinger Escape Plan. Unfortunately, I don't know his name, and I've never really quite got into the Dillinger Escape Plan. I found them a little too mathy at times for me, which is, you know, I do like mathy, you know, elements to a band, but Dillinger Escape Plan always seems sort of driven by the mathy elements, which kind of put me off. And then of course you got Max Cavalera, who's, let's face it, I mean, Sepultura and Soulfly are legendary. I'm not a massive fan of either band, but I've got complete respect for them. I think, you know, the things both bands have added to sort of metal as a genre, it cannot be shirked at. And with those heavyweights in there, you'd expect something better than what this is, really. They're a collection of fairly solid, well-written metal songs, with elements of sort of hardcore punk thrown in as well, with all three guys getting in vocally on the act. But I just don't really get excited listening to it. I just don't engage with it as much as probably you should be with a record with these guys in. So on that level, this one is actually just going to get a fairly average 7 out of 10. Right, next on the list we have Royal Blood. Royal Blood, if you haven't heard of Royal Blood, you've been living under a rock. You really have been living under a rock. Debut album, straight to #1 in the UK. They kind of came out of nowhere. 2-piece from Brighton, but so good. Riffs, brilliant. Drumming, brilliant. Vocals, superb. Kind of a musy Queens of the Stone Age, White Stripes, although I don't really think it sounds a bit much like White Stripes. You know, I think that's just a little bit lazy on some people's part, comparing them to the White Stripes. Led Zeppelin is quite bluesy, garage rock. The difference being that it's a bass and drums rather than a guitar and drums, and actually I prefer that because it adds a bit more depth to the sound. I think often when you have just a guitarist and a drummer, you lose. I like bass in my songs. I like bass. I do. I've got to have some bass. But yeah, this is just a quality record throughout. Taut songwriting, great tunes. Only thing I could say is that perhaps it could have done with being a wee bit longer in length. 32 minutes for an album. Really, guys? Really? So yeah, but that gets a really solid 8.5 out of 10 for me. Some really brilliant tracks. I would happily suggest people listen to the songs Blood Hands and Figure It Out. For me, 2 best tracks on the record. So yeah. Oh, and Loose Change, very good song. Alright, next we have The Day's War by Lonely the Brave. Now, this got recommended to me on the strength of oh, on the same week, Royal Blood got to number 1, this band got to number 14, but you've never heard of them. No, I hadn't. I hadn't heard Lonely the Brave, and I will be quite honest here, I still wish I hadn't have. It's a bit unfair perhaps, but they're not interesting at all. I put the record on, I listen to it, and it's kind of that sort of almost post-hardcore emo type alt rock, but it's just lacking in any kind of ambition or anything interesting. It is just rock by numbers. It's got no real fizz to it. I can't remember really a single track off the album. I can't identify different tracks from other tracks. It kind of all blends into one seamless dirge. It's just a bit meh. So, and to be fair, I haven't listened to it masses amount of times. I've only listened to it about 3 or 4 times, trying desperately to for some element of it to grab my attention. And you know, the vocalist is pretty good. You know, he's not a whiny git, so I know that gives him some presence, and the musicianship as a whole, you know, they're not bad musicians. They're actually pretty competent at their musicians. I think just the songwriting unfortunately lacks imagination. So that one's only for me going to get a 6 out of 10. What else have I got? Oh, Hozier. Yes, Hozier. This is the last of my list. Hozier is I've actually came across him after watching a review of his debut album by another YouTube reviewer, Spectrum Pulse, I believe, did a review of it, and he basically convinced me to give him a go. And you know what? It's not normally the sort of thing I'd go for. He's kind of like a soul singer, sort of soul delta blues almost, bits of gospel thrown in as well. Did a song that has had quite a lot of coverage earlier in the year called Take Me to Church, which is absolute brilliant song, by the way. And yeah, actually I quite like the record. It's not going to be like one of my eternal favourites or anything, but for something I wouldn't usually buy and something I actually normally wouldn't choose to listen to, I actually really quite enjoyed it. Some really good tunes. I like Jackie and Wilson is a really solid tune, and overall the feel of the album, it's quite dark, and thematically it's quite interesting. The lyrics particularly are superb. The imagery he uses a lot of sort of, in quite a few songs, he uses a lot of religious iconography, and to describe relationships as in. I find it just really quite a captivating album for the most part. So that for me gets really a pretty good 8 out of 10. Coming up in future days, I am going to be reviewing the new U2 album. Yes, I'm going to take the plunge and listen to it, despite the fact that U2 have not released anything decent since the Joshua Tree. And yes, I know I'm going to get people looking at me funny for that, but it's true. Joshua Tree for me was the pinnacle of U2. Everything that followed that is particularly Rattle and Hum. Rattle and Hum really irritates me. Pretentious wankery at its worst. But Songs of Innocence, it's caused a bit of a stir with the whole iTunes debacle. So I'm gonna sort of listen to that over the next few days until the review up. Also as well, Multiply by Ed Sheeran. I know I'm meant to be a rock and metal reviewer by trade, but you know what? It's meant to be one of the biggest pop albums of the year, and I really want to see why so many people buy it. And to see actually if it's got anything of merit to it, because you know, Ed Sheeran, I didn't mind him when he first came out, but when I heard Sing or whatever it was, the first single off Multiply, I was like a bit, what is this shit? So who knows? But thanks for watching. If you managed to get this far, I've been John. Please comment, subscribe, or neither, whichever. And I will see you next time.